What's up, everybody? It's Grim, and you're watching Thrash Maniac 99 Wrestling, Gaming, and Metal videos. Hit the real intro.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and this is episode 8 of the Horsemen podcast, and good lord, how have we survived this long? I got no fucking clue. Today, though, only 3 of us. Artur Felipe Castana couldn't be here with us today, but he's here in spirit. Same with Mr. Raphael Fireblade. So, of course, yours truly, Thrash Maniac 99, is here as the moderator, the host, the head honcho of this ship. And joining me are 2 of the regulars. First, all the way from Germany, Ms. Hannah Klein.
Good evening, good day, or whatever time it is.
And then, of course, the man I like to call the lagger, even though he ain't lagging today, for once, thank God, is Horror Master.
Twice. Remember, last episode they didn't like a bit.
Yeah, but not nearly as bad as any other time. But please welcome Mr. Horror Master, Ricky Karaman.
Evening.
And today's episode is going to be one of the toughest ones. Top 10 underrated metal albums. Now, there are so many great albums out there. Some that are overrated, some that are rated properly, but we're here to talk about the albums that we feel are great or influential, but haven't gotten enough love or credit among the metal community. Or albums that perhaps you may not have heard of that you should give a shot to. So it could go all sorts of different directions. So, to kick things off, we of course start off with our honorable mentions. And because my honorable mentions list is way too long, I'm going to let Ricky start this off.
Well, I just have 2 honorable mentions, and they go together hand in hand, and that's Judas Priest's Juggulator and Demolition. From the Tim Ripper, Owens era, those 2 albums get a lot of shit because, you know,
it's not Rob Halford.
It's not Rob Halford. I mean, they're still good albums. I mean, Tim Ripper Owens is really an underrated vocalist. He can even go neck and neck with a Rob, but a lot of people give a lot of shit to those albums, which they're still good. I mean, they've aged well. I'll tell you that they've aged better than, let's just say, like Iron Maiden's Virtual 11 or St. Anger. But they've aged better than those other albums. But yeah, these 2 albums are very important to the Priest legacy, and I think, I'm not sure if Rob has played any of Ripper Owens songs live. I'm not sure. I have to check that.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be cool if he did. I think kind of did on the Retribution tour, like 1 or 2 songs. But still, it's like Iron Maiden. They play some of their songs from the Blaze Bailey era.
Probably more from X Factor, because that's the more loved of the 2 Blaze albums.
Yeah, but yeah, mentioned Juggulator and Demolition.
Yeah, and so now to Hannah's honorable mentions.
This time I have less honorable mentions than last episode.
By less, how many do you? By less, is that like what, 5?
Well, I've only got 5. So you were right. But my first honorable mention is Aluna's Awakening the Forest. Aluna is a British female-fronted doom metal band, and I think their best record is probably White Whorehound, but this one is the follow-up to that one. I really enjoy. I mean, the songs are good, the vocals are very well executed, and I mean, I sometimes like a good female-fronted doom metal band, especially if it's Aluna. Well, it's my first one, and the second one is Empty Space Meditation by Urfaust. Urfaust, of course, a lo-fi black metal band from the Netherlands. And the thing with this album is that it gets a lot of hate. Most Urfaust records are very well received. This one isn't. And I mean, the thing about this record is in its title. It's called Empty Space Meditation. So when you listen to it, you will expect that it's kind of meditating and monotonous, and that's why most people hate it. But I mean, the title says what it is. And regarding meditation and being repetitive, I mean, it's exactly what it says, and it's very well executed, and I simply love to relax to it, and that's why I think it's fairly underrated. My next honorable mention is Katamania's Location Cold. Katamania, a melodic black metal band from Finland, which most people don't seem to know. And to be honest, most records are shit. But this one is great, from the first note to the last note, and it has an awesome cover of I Wanna Be Somebody by Wasp on it. And you should really check that out, it rocks. The next honorable mention is Midnight Odyssey's Shards of Silver Fate, which is this kind of stellar, atmospheric black metal record from Australia. Has this space theme, and it works very well. But since it's more than 2 hours long, most people don't know it and think it's too long. But I think every minute on this record is awesome. And then my last honorable mention, sorry if I'm talking so much, is Black Clouds Gathering by Valendusk, which is an Indonesian kind of pagan black metal band. And the thing is, if you talk about black metal and or folk metal, you mostly talk about the European scene, but not about any band from Asia. And this record is awesome. And I was so shocked or surprised when I heard that they were from Indonesia. And awesome record, you should check it out.
Alrighty.
All right.
Now for my long-winded honorable mentions, I've got 9. Because this is
So you
so
have
hard.
more than me.
9.
9.
I put that GIF image of that in my NASCAR predictions video when I said prediction number 9. I put that in there. I thought that was pretty funny. But yeah,
you
I've
have
got.
to do it proper German way.
But I've got 9 honorable mentions because this was such a difficult one for me. Because many albums I love, I feel, are very underrated. And to kick things off, the most recent album I have on my list from 2014. For my first honorable mention is Black Crown Initiates, The Wreckage of Stars, their debut album from 2014. I talked about this band a little bit in the last episode when we were talking about our 10 bands from our country, states, or surrounding areas. BCI's from Pennsylvania, and I described them as if Mastodon played death metal. It's prog death metal that, if you ask me if they put out another album this year, which I hope they do because it's been a few years since their second album came out, I got a feeling they could rise up and become one of the leading forerunners of American prog extreme metal. So I got Wreckage of Stars. Next up, I've got Savatage, Hall of the Mountain King, which I bought this album at like an old store called Evans Variety that mostly sell like furniture, but they have a bunch of old CDs and cassettes or vinyl or whatever. And I found this, and I think I got this album for like $2. And it's
That's really a good album.
yeah, I mean prog, power metal, whatever you want to call it. Plus, I love John Oliva's voice. Chris Oliva, rest in peace. Excellent guitar work on this album. Next up, this one will make Hannah happy, because it's a black metal album. Samael's Worship Hymn. Fucking love that album. Love that album. And I talked about this when I mentioned Samael in an episode previously, that it's shocking that in that early 90s black metal gold rush, not many bands went down to Samael route where it was more doomy in the black metal sense, but Samael's Worship Hymn, love, awesome black metal album. Next up, I got As Sucks Anti-Capital, which was also 1991. Florida Death Grind. It's pretty much a grindcore styled album, but it sounds like a death metal band because it was recorded at Moore Sound, and Scott Burns, the god of producers, worked on that album. And if I were to compare them to someone else, I'd say they're like if Cannibal Corpse played grindcore, because vocally it's very low, it's very heavy, and even technical at times. Plus, there's a 9-second song on there called Feasts of War that kicks ass. Next up, bit of a controversial choice, Trivium's Ember to Inferno, their debut album. Because when people talk about Trivium, they mostly talk about one of two albums, Ascendancy or Shogun. Not many people give them credit for their debut work when Matt Heafy was only 17 when he did this album on guitar and vocals, and of course clean vocals weren't the best, but I enjoyed them, and his scream wasn't quite as strong as what it would eventually become. But musically it's very thrash. It's very much like a thrash album with hardcore screams and clean vocals combined. And it was sort of the precursor to what they would eventually become throughout until Shogun, and then they've gone through a lesser period. Now they're back to their roots, so to speak. Next up, and I blame Sam Dunn for turning me on to this band, Pestilence, but my choice, Malleus Maleficarum, their first album. Because when it comes to Pestilence, two albums get discussed, Consuming Impulse and Testimony of the Ancients, which are like night and day. Consuming Impulse, more straight up death metal, and then Testimony being more tech death, or prog death, whichever. But Malleus Maleficarum, I wouldn't even call it a death metal album. I'd say straight up brutal thrash. Like, it's so thrashy, and Martin Van Druren's voice wasn't quite as defined. It was kind of like Sepultura meets Sadus at this point for Pestilence, and I know they were huge into Sepultura at the time, so I could definitely hear a Sepultura influence on that album. Plus, lyrically, you could kind of confuse it for a Carcass album because it's got a lot of medical terminology and stuff like that, like Bacterial Surgery, Chemotherapy. Those are two awesome tracks. Next up, a German band that I feel doesn't get enough credit, Morgoth, their debut album, Cursed, also 1991. Basically the German version of Death, but it still has an original sound to it. It's not like it's a Death ripoff. There's still something original about Morgoth in their early years. Mark Groove's voice is what would happen if you took Chuck and John Tardy, put them in a blender, and you get that singing voice. Next up, Internal Bleeding, Voracious Contempt, their first album from 95. Basically on the border of brutal death metal and slam death metal. Like, this is one of very few slam bands that I actually enjoy. And this album kind of gets a little bit of shit because the production wasn't so good, because the bass was so damn high and you couldn't really hear the guitars all that well. But hey, it's still a brutal album, and that's all I got for that. And then my final honorable mention, Volcano, Bloody Vengeance, 1986, extreme metal from Brazil. Basically, black metal, death metal, and thrash, all in a blender. Precursor to what Sarcophago and Sepultura would do around the same time. And plus the final track, which is like the intro, outro thing, Voices from Hell, and the title track. That Voices of Hell, so creepy. It's fucking like it's like you're trapped in hell and you're getting fucked by Satan or whatever. It's so weird. And then the title track being more of a Death Doom song, if you ask me, while everything else is like so fast. And there's even a song called Death Metal on there, and it's not a Possessed cover, funny enough. But that's my honorable mentions. Now on to the actual list, and I will kick this off at my number 10. Number 10, the Haunted self-titled debut. I mean, whenever people talk about the thrash revival, many people forget that there were a few Swedish bands in the late 90s, early 2000s that were doing this before Evil, Warbringer, Havoc, or even Municipal Waste. You had the Haunted putting out their debut self-titled album, and so thrashy, and I also loved Peter's vocals being in that more punky side, and even some melody. This is to me like if Slayer was from Sweden. This sounded so much like Slayer to me, but also had a little more melody in the music. I know a lot of people would call the Haunted a mellow death band. I disagree. They are not mellow death. They are thrash or even groove metal towards their later albums. But the Haunted self-titled debut, fucking love that album. Plus the song Hate Song, perfect opening track for that album. Henna, you're number 10.
My number 10 is a bit special to me because I don't really listen to metalcore, but I really like this record, and I think not a lot of people know about it. There's this little Swedish band called Roswell, and they released an album called Void, I think in early 2000s, and it's very tight. It's it's melodic, but not too much. Very energetic. I love to listen to it when I'm driving through the German countryside, and it just kicks ass. And usually I don't really enjoy metalcore. It's just not something that I usually listen to. But this one is great, and I think it's highly underrated because nobody really knows about it.
Well, you know, it's funny. If I were to have included a metalcore album, I would have went with Earth Crisis Destroy the Machines. Because Earth Crisis is one of those early pioneers that doesn't get mentioned that much, and they're a pretty good band. Ricky, you're number 10.
My number 10.
9.
You should have waited for your turn.
Sorry.
Anna's gonna love me for this one. My number 10 is Rammstein's debut album, Herzeleid. I don't know if you say it like that.
Herzeleid.
Herzeleid. I was gonna go with Rosen.
It means the suffering of the heart.
Thank you. I was gonna go for a Rosenauts, but I knew somebody else was gonna get that album. But I was like, I'm gonna give them their little time.
That would be my second choice regarding Rammstein.
Well, yeah, this was in '95, their debut album. I mean, it kind of was it started a spark in Germany, but not really the big times until they released Sehnsucht in '97. But, you know, this album got them a lot of success because of the one Rammstein song titled Rammstein.
Which I love that song.
Appeared on the movie Lost Highway, which, you know, has Marilyn Manson.
Along with Heirate mich. Heirate mich also appears in that movie.
I mean, that movie gave Rammstein a bit of fame, but my favorite song from that album is Du Riechst so good. I just love that song. It makes me want to dance. Like, even the music video, like it's so young.
Live, that song is amazing.
I mean, I like Flaka when he does that song. He dance. That's why I love that song. It's so fun to listen to. Number 10, Herzeleid. I don't know what I have.
Herzeleid.
Herzeleid. There you go.
I think my favorite song on that record is either Weißes Fleisch, which is very controversial here because it deals with school shootings. And killing somebody, and I also really love Seemann, the ballad on the record. A very famous German singer did a cover of that together with Apocalyptica.
Oh, didn't know that. The more
amazing.
The more you know.
Yeah, the German singer is called Nina Hagen. Very weird person.
I need to listen to that album more. I've only heard the song Rammstein, and I fucking love that because it was almost like a borderline doom song with industrial on top, which I really liked. And also, I seen the live videos for that where Till Lindemann has on that pyro suit and his arms are on fire.
Oh yeah,
That's awesome.
Or where he wears the mantle that is burning, and
yeah. I mean, in the
the
documentary,
flamethrowers.
yeah. I mean, I know in the documentary they had some in the U.S. They were, you know how the U.S. is. They were like, no, you can't do that. It's fire hazard, you know.
Yeah. Oh, America, why must you disappoint us sometimes? Alright, so now on to 99999!
9999.
Imagine if there's a porn video where the dude jacks off and he just goes 99.
I mean,
Oh my god,
you just
what
have
have I
to
done?
scream some German shit and everything.
What have I done? Okay. This video's gotta get demonetized. Maybe not. I don't know. YouTube's weird. But number 9, I'll let Ricky start this one off.
My number 9, and I already mentioned it, the X Factor, Iron Maiden. It was since 1995. It was the first of 2 albums that Blaze Bailey was a part of. And again, it gets a lot of shit. Not in. This is a really dark album compared to their later albums, because this talks about, you know, at the time Steve Harris was going through a divorce with his first marriage, and you know a divorce, it's kind of hard. I mean, you go through a lot of emotions, and what a good way to start the album by the opus Sign of the Cross. I mean, it's just a beautiful song. And when I remember saying they were in the Legacy of the Beast tour, when they announced a year ago they were playing that song, I was shocked, because the last time they played Sign of the Cross was in their New World tour, which again, long overdue, and I'm really excited to see that song live when it's Iron Maiden in September. So yeah, my number 9, the X Factor.
Alright, my number 9. Of course, it's debated if whether or not you would consider this band metal, but this album was probably their most metal album they ever did. Cro-Mag's Best Wishes, 1989. Now, of course, people debate Cro-Mags, they're a hardcore band. First album, yeah. Rest of their catalog, no. I would consider the rest of their catalog crossover or even straight up thrash. I would consider this more of a straight up thrash album, because also Harley, the bass player, took over on vocals for this album, and he reminds me of like a hardcore version of James Hetfield with his voice. And, of course, the drumming from I'm trying to remember the drummer's name. I can't remember, but the other 2 members on guitar, Doug Holland and Paris Mitchell-Mahu, great underrated guitar duo for a hardcore crossover thrash band. They don't get talked about as a great guitar duo on those first 2 Cro-Mags albums, but I mean, this album would be like if Metallica played in a New York hardcore band that brought in metal influence. I mean, you could tell Metallica influence on this album. After all, Metallica was one of Cro-Mags' biggest influences during their early days in the 80s. Hell, there's even a picture of Harley and Hetfield together, which is pretty cool. But favorite songs on this album, I really love the opening track, Death Camps, The Only One, and even the closing track, The Age of Quarrel. And even Shadows Fall covered that song on a bonus track, I believe, of the album Retribution, and it was a pretty good cover. But Cro-Mag's Best Wishes, my number 9. Hannah, your 9!
My number 999.
Oh, damn it, I just spilled water all over me. Damn it.
Sadly, isn't a German band.
Imagine the irony.
That would have
Yeah.
It's in fact a Russian band that lives in the Ukraine and sings in Finnish. Weird, I know.
I am lost.
Yeah, I'm lost.
So they're a Russian band that lives in the Ukraine but sings in Finnish.
Yes, in poetic Finnish. It's weird. I talked about them before. I love them dearly. They're called Kauan. And they have released quite a few records and all are amazing. I think the band in itself is highly underrated, and especially their first record, Lumikuru, is even more underrated. Every song on this record is beautiful. It mixes this kind of Russian Finnish folklore music with post metal and black metal, and from first note to the last note, it's kind of this journey, just epic, and I get lost when I listen to it. Yeah, I can. Well, the record this band is most known for is probably Sorny Mai with this, which is this concept record about the this kind of accident where some Russian scientists got lost while hiking, and all of them died. And nobody knows what happened. Great record, but I mean, Lumikuru is their first and my second favorite after Sorny Nai, and I can highly recommend it. And now everybody is confused.
Yeah.
Oh, a Russian band that lives in Ukraine but sings in Finnish. That is very, very bizarre. Alright, so now on to our number 8s, and since I lost for words, I'll let Hannah start this one.
This time you might know the band that I'm talking about, and it's The Wild Hunt by Watain. The thing with The Wild Hunt is it came out after Lawless Darkness, which is without doubt Watain's magnum opus. And it just isn't Lawless Darkness. I mean, it marks a shift in style. And they kind of tried to impersonate Bathory on this one. At least that's what many people hold against it. But I still think it's a very, very solid record. There are awesome songs on there like The Child Must Die or The Wild Hunt. I really like listening to this record because it was the first Watain record that I discovered, and I love They Rode On. I mean, of course it tries to be Bathory, but it manages to do so. An epic song, great progression within the song, and I like this record. And I think it's underrated. Highly underrated.
Alright, Ricky, you're number 8.
Alright, my number 8 is Sabotage by Black Sabbath.
That's a good one.
I was gonna go with Endless Cross, but I know Archer loved that album, and I know he was gonna have that album on his list. So I was like, I'm gonna get another album. And, you know, after listening to every Black Sabbath album that I have, Sabotage stood out the most. I mean, this one's in 75. It was the first album that Tony Iommi produced, and that's when it started him as a producer. I mean, many people argue that album the beginning of the prog metal movement. I mean, there's no question about it. I mean, you have the song "Symptom of the Universe," which is
love that song.
That
in my opinion, the best Sabbath riff of all time.
It is. I mean, and beyond that, I mean, you got songs like "Superstars," "Megalomania," "The Wine," Thrill of It All. It's just
"Hole in the Sky" is a great track too. I remember the first time I heard that song, it was on the Jackass episode when they did the Gumball Rally. When they were on their way back to England, they played that song. I was like, that's a good tune.
And now I understand what why Martin Popoff chose this album as his favorite Black Sabbath album. And the one complaint I have is that ugly cover on the album, which I actually have Tony Iommi's book, which talks about it, which I want to read just a bit about that album cover. And I quote, "The Sabotage sleeve is probably my most recent one. It has us posing in front of a mirror that reflected the wrong way. We turned up this photo session for it and Bill said, 'I don't know what to wear.' He turned to his wife, 'Can I borrow those tights?' He put her tights on, but he had the check underwear underneath that was shining through. Typical Bill. Ozzy didn't do much better, dressing up in some sort of Japanese morning gown. I've ever heard of things such a naff thing. We're all so different there. Fucking hell. We have trouble living that down over the years."
Wow.
But yeah,
I always wondered why it looked like Ozzy had on heels.
Yeah. And an Ozzy's book, which I have also, but they didn't bring it. He talks about that. The reason he was like that, he was really high. I mean, he did a lot of cocaine and the photo shoot, and just went to Sharon's dressing room and just picked that.
Oh, Ozzy. Get well soon, Ozzy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but hate Sabotage.
Alright, my number 8 is interesting. Celtic Frost, Vanity Nemesis. A.k.a. the forgotten Celtic Frost album, if you ask me, because the reason why I feel it's underrated and gets forgotten about is because it came out after that abomination known as Cold Lake. 2 years after Cold Lake came out, this album was out, and not really a lot of people paid attention to it at the time, which was 1990 when this came out. But listening back, it's like some of Celtic Frost's most underrated tracks came from this album, like Name of My Bride, Wings of Solitude, Phallic Tantrum, the duality of Vanity, then the song Nemesis. There's some really valuable tracks on here. Now, as far as what I would describe it, I really don't know.
There is a great David Bowie cover on there.
Yeah, great David Bowie cover. There's, I think, 2 cover songs on that album. But yeah, and to describe what it's like, I've heard a lot of people say that it's a thrash album. Some people say it's just a traditional metal album, or even gothic metal. I would make the argument, now this may sound weird, and I saw this in a review of the album on Metallum, and I thought about it, I'm thinking, yeah, there is a good point. Some people could call this a groove metal album, because it's not straight up thrash. There's a lot of mid-tempo stuff on here. And also Tom Warrior's voice on this album I thought was really cool. His attempt at trying to go mostly clean vocals, and I liked it. Plus, the song Name of My Bride's, the main riff reminds me of In My Darkest Hour by Megadeth. And it's a great tune. So, the Forgotten Celtic Frost album, my number 8. So, Vanity Nemesis, go check it out if you haven't. If you're a Celtic Frost fan but haven't heard this album, please do yourself a favor and listen to it. You won't regret it. But now to number 7, and I shall kick this one off. My number 7, and I've been listening to this album quite a bit as of late, Razor Evil Invaders.
Oh.
I mean, Canadian speed / thrash. It's like on the border of both thrash and speed metal. It's like if Exciter was mixed with Slayer, is what I would describe Evil Invaders. I mean, the opening instrumental, Nowhere Fast, probably one of the best instrumentals I've ever heard. Cross Me Fool, a great Canadian speed metal tune. Tortured Skulls, great thrash tune. Thrash Dance, the closing song. I mean, Steve McLaren's voice being so raw and aggressive, and plus the production, where the hi-hats open. I just love this album. I probably could go on forever. And before I do, I'm going to hand it over to Ricky. Your number 7.
My number 7 is an album from a band that I kind of forgot to put them on my underrated bands, and I'm ashamed that I didn't put them on because they're so good. And I don't know if maybe people have heard it, but the band Chastain and their album Ruler of the Wasteland. This album came out in '86, and it's their sophomore effort, and it's a beast of an album. I mean, oh my god, this is an album that if I were to tell you that the lead vocalist is a woman, talk about in '86, but there wasn't a lot of women in metal, but sounds like a guy. I mean, her vocals are just so amazing. They're so losing my words. They're so they're just so good. I mean, my favorite song on that track is called "Angel Mercy," and that just makes me feel like it's the end of the world. I'm on a church. I'm on my knees. My hands are in the air, and I'm screaming the words "Angel of Mercy," and then that guitar solo. I mean, just gives me chills. I mean, if you're a fan of and the riff of there's the title track, the main riff is exactly like Master of Puppets. So you should check that out. Check out Chastain. Yeah, I mean, their other albums, they're pretty good. Check them out. But Road of Wasteland is their best album, in my opinion.
All right, Hannah, your number 7.
My number 7 is mostly known for records such as At the Heart of Winter or Pure Holocaust. But I think All Shall Fall by Immortal is underrated.
Yeah.
I mean, it's my first Immortal record that I ever listened to, and it's still my favorite. Well, besides At the Heart of Winter. And with Unearthly Kingdom, my favorite Immortal song is on that record. And I think it's underrated. Should be bigger.
Especially since that was the last album before Northern Chaos Gods came out in 2018.
Yep.
I mean, if I would have put an Immortal album, I would have went with Diabolical Full Moon Mysticism for my list. Because, I mean, that album, most people remember for Call of the Winter Moon and that cheesy music video. There are other good songs on there. So, yeah. And I love that music video because it cracks me up. Especially with Abbott being the way he is. Alright, now on to our number 6, the number of the beast. Ricky, you start this off.
Number 6 is The High and the Low by Marilyn Manson. I could have gone with his new album, Heaven Upside Down, or I could have gone with The Pale Emperor, but this one to me is a bit more. We have a different setup, Marilyn Manson, a bit more human setup, Marilyn Manson, because this one's during the time that he got his first divorce and his first marriage. He was going through some hardships with his girlfriend at the time. And if you see there's a thing, a documentary on YouTube, I don't know if it's still there. And during that time, he cut himself. He put blood all over his walls, the knives on his walls. I mean, he could have easily killed himself. So this album gets all that aggression, gets all that emotion. So beautiful that the song that I would recommend everyone to listen to, and I think it's best of that album, is "Running Today to the World." Such a beautiful ballad. I mean, when I first heard it, it made me cry. And it's a great album. I mean, that whole album's very underrated. But yeah, Marilyn Manson, The High and the Low.
Alright, my number 6. I talked about earlier with Volcano, of course, a Brazilian band. I got another Brazilian band at number 6, Mutilator, Immortal Force. Their first of only 2 albums they ever released, and this was 87 when it came out. And Mutilator, Brazilian thrash metal that have some death metal riffs thrown in on top of it, and some black metal style drumming. but vocally, kind of like a punkier version of Razor, I would probably say, like a more punky version of Steve McLaren's voice. Mutilator's one of the few of that early Brazilian extreme metal scene that I feel doesn't get talked about quite as often as, say, Sarcophago, Sepultura, or even Volcano. Mutilator was going strong, and their vocalist is still one of Sepultura's roadies to this day. So they had a very good relationship with Sepultura back in the day, still do. But there are so many good songs on here, like the title track, Bloodstorm, the song Mutilator. There's some really heavy tracks for a Brazilian thrash metal album. Definitely check out Immortal Force by Mutilator. But yeah, it's a unique kind of thrash. It's thrash, but with death metal riffs and black metal drumming, which is, I don't know how they could pull that off, but they did. Plus the production, super lo-fi. So there you go. Hannah, you're number 6.
We already talked about my number 6.
Oh, we did?
Rammstein.
Oh.
But I choose a different record, and I choose Rosenrot. And the reason for that is that it's mostly considered to be a collection of B-sides from the Reise Reise recording. Reise Reise, of great records, together with Mutter, my favorite Rammstein records. But Rosenrot also contains great songs. There is, of course, the title track on there. Then you have Benzin, you have Zerstören, and one of my absolute favorite Rammstein songs, Feuer und Wasser, which probably has the greatest Rammstein guitar solo in it. And I mean, what I love about this record are especially this song and the ballads. Some people think it's too soft or that it's lacking in some parts, but I think it's a great record. Just overlooked. The same could be said, like Ricky already said, about Herzeleid, which is their first and probably the most raw record they've ever released. But still, they have great songs on all records Rammstein has ever released. And Rosenrot, in my opinion, a great record that is underrated, very much underrated. And I love that they started to play songs from that record live, especially Zerstören, which is, I mean, the lyrics are just great. How you destroy stuff, but the way they do it in German, it's so poetic. And the same goes for Rosenrot, which is basically a homage to this very famous German poem by Goethe. Probably nobody has heard of it outside of Germany, but I mean, Goethe is like German Shakespeare.
Wow. Alright, and now to the top 5, where things get really tough as usual. And Hannah, I'll let you begin.
Yeah, my number 5 is mostly on there because it's overlooked and underrated because the band released it as an EP and not as a full record. It came out after a very long release called Triangle, and just a year after that, I mean, Triangle is like a triple record that is like 3 hours long or something like that. And the year after, Shamash, a band from Switzerland, released an EP called The Marlboro Chance, Hermaphrodite. And it's a very difficult piece of music to listen to. I mean, it's very hard to get into it because there isn't much of a traditional song structure in it. It's mostly, it tells the story of Lautremont's Hermaphrodite that is included in his book The Marlboro Chance. It's a very dark tale, and the first one that deals with this kind of topic. It's mostly like Shamash delivered this kind of story about this poor hermaphrodite, and It took me a lot of time to get into it, but once I kind of managed to get in there, it's a fucking great record. And it's a shame that not many people know about it. I saw them perform it live in its entirety, and it was so worth it to travel all the way to see them. Weird, but so good, and sadly overlooked by basically everybody.
All right, Ricky, you're number 5.
My number cinco is. You guys know that I like the ballad. I mean, it's pretty obvious. And one of the bands that has a lot of ballads records is the band Him. And I think many people could disagree with this one, but their most underrated album, Deep Shadows and Brilliant Highlights. This came out after 2 really successful albums, Greatest Love Songs Volume 666 and Resupply Romance, which this album nearly broke the band because the record company started seeing that they were getting popular and they wanted to get more involved in the production. And then one day a song could be sound like something like some Stone Temple Pilots. The next day could sound something completely different. Which that's why this record is highly underrated, because the songs, even though they're typical Him songs, they're not the same as, like I said, Greatest Romance or Greatest Love Songs, or even the later album with Love Metal. But this album still has some underrated tracks like Enjoy and Sorrow, which is probably my favorite. Love You to Death. No One Will Love You. Salt in My Wounds. It's just a great album that, you know, people should listen to more. And all of Him, every Him album is a great album, but this one particularly should listen to more. So yeah.
All right, and then my number 5 is from Ricky's neck of the woods, from Texas. Rigor Mortis' self-titled debut, 1988. I mean, the only thing Rigor Mortis is known for is that their guitarist ended up becoming one of the main songwriters and guitarists for Ministry after this album. But this self-titled debut for Rigor Mortis on Capitol Records during the time when major labels wanted to sweep up a thrash band to put out thrash out bigger to the masses. This album, unfortunately, like I said, was the only album that they had on a major label before they ended up breaking up, I believe, a couple of years after. But, good lord, you want to talk about thrash metal perfection. This is it. This is almost like as if Yngwie Malmsteen came over to Texas and joined a thrash metal band. Because there's a lot of, like, neoclassical style guitar.
Please do make that happen.
But like the solos on this album are so classical inspired, but you got a lot of heavy motherfucking riffs. Lyrically, you could also consider this lyrically to be a death metal album because there are songs like "Welcome to Your Funeral," I believe was the opening track, "Demons," "Vampire," "Reanimator," "Bodily Dismemberment." There's a lot of brutal lyrics on this album. But yeah, Rigor Mortis' self-titled debut, Texas thrash metal, which I feel is a very underrated metal scene in America, because you got them, you got Watchtower, Devastation, Rotting Corpse, Agony Column, eventually DRI, and Power Trip. So, yeah, I want to see them do an Overkill Global about Texas thrash. I think that'd be a good episode.
Yeah, I'll be in it.
But you have to film this episode in a Whataburger.
Yes, I'll do it.
There's a Whataburger in fucking Alabama, and their chicken sandwich, probably the best chicken sandwich I've ever had in my life. So there you go.
If I ever go to Texas, I have to go there.
You gotta go to Whataburger. It's really good.
If you guys ever come to Texas, hit me up. I'll try to, I don't know, make you barbecue something. I don't know.
Whataburger barbecue.
Alrighty, and now on to the top 4, and I shall kick this one off at number 4. I actually got 2 albums, but it's gonna make sense because they pretty much are one and the same almost. Edge of Sanity, Crimson 1 and 2. Edge of Sanity in general, one of the most underrated bands in the history of metal, extreme metal, death metal, prog, whatever you want to say. Dan Swano, in my opinion, the greatest musician in metal history. And the first Crimson album, 96. Wow, you want to talk about a dark, atmospheric, melodic, prog, brutal album? This is it. I mean, both albums follow the concept of the idea of Earth no longer having the ability to breed, and then things go wrong. Plus, on Crimson 1, you had Michael from Opeth, a tribute on some guitar and vocals. And also, one of Michael Ackerfeld's most famous screams was on this album. After Swano does a little bit of clean vocals, and then Michael just comes in out of nowhere and just scares you to death. And then, even a nice, wonderful duet between Michael and Dan. That sounded awesome. Crimson 2, on the other hand, which came out 7 years later, totally different vibe. This was Dan Swano pretty much doing it all himself, except different vocalists. I believe it was I'm trying to remember his name, Raga Johansson, who's also the lead singer of Rip Spreader from Sweden, which is along with Bloodbath and Repugna, as part of that Swedish death metal revival scene in the 2000s. But he attributed the growls, whereas Swano couldn't do them at the time. But Swano did all the instruments and the clean vocals. A lot more keyboards on the second one. To me, this was like Dream Theater playing death metal on Crimson 2. It was so good. And it's a shame that that was the final album of this band. I wish Edge of Sanity would come back, because I got a feeling if they would have stuck around, they'd probably be a juggernaut now. But hey, we got a similar band, Witherscape, with Dan Swano. So, and I hope they put out a new album this year, because that last one, best album 2016 in my opinion. Ricky, you're number 4.
My number 4, it's this one was it's gonna be a bit controversial. Some people think it's gonna be overrated, and I understand why. And that is For Those About to Rock by AC/DC.
I would actually agree.
I mean, I could have gone with Flicking the Switch. I could have gone with Fly on the Wall. I could have gone with Heat Sticker. Could have gone with Who Made Who. I could have gone with everything between For Those About to Rock and The Razor's Edge. But you know, this album, it's just so good. I mean, it has, in my mind, the heaviest song AC/DC has ever done in their life, and that is Evil Walks. I mean, that riff, that's so heavy. I mean, it is borderline, like I said, borderline heavy metal. Besides that, I mean, you even got Inject the Venom, the title track. Lick It Up. No, it's not Lick It Up. It's I forgot the name of that song.
Suck it up.
Let's lick it up, kick it up, lick it up. I forgot. I don't know, but it's one of the staple songs. And this one's the album, the second album away from the Black album, which is their biggest album of all time. So it was kind of hard for them. It was a test of them to see if they can max what they did with Back in Black, which there's no way they could have done it. They kind of did, but there's no way there's no way in hell AC/DC they're gonna do the same thing they did with Back in Black. And rumor has it that AC/DC is gonna record the album is recorded, and they're gonna release a new album, which, if we go back to the last episode of 2018, I said, if that ever happens, I'm going to say, I told you so. It's not been confirmed yet, so I'm still holding it in. But yeah, number 4.
Holding it in like a long, loud fart.
But yeah.
All right, Hannah, you're number 4.
My number 4 is an album by Borknagar.
Thank you.
And the album I'm talking about is Earth, which marks the return of ICS Vortex. I mean, he did a song on Universal, but on Earth he returned as a full-time member, and every fucking song on this record is amazing. I mean, you have 3 vocalists, you have Solifat, you have Winterstork and ICS Vortex, and the instrumentation behind all of it, done by mostly Oystein G. Brun, is epic. And but I mean, this record only holds a 75% rating on Metallum, which is shocking in my opinion.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know about it. And I mean, when people talk about Borknagar, they mostly talk about Winter Thrice, the latest album, or
Which I love.
I mean, it's great, but I mean, Earth is my favorite. And or talk about the Olden Domain or Empiricism and all the records with Garm from Ulver. But Earth, in my opinion, is the best record they ever released. And I simply think it's underrated because of that, mainly.
Yeah, and also the mention with Erd, I love the song The Earthling. That's one of my favorite sing-along songs to sing to. It's such a good song. Plus, a really solid cover of Metallica's My Friend of Misery on there, too. I like that cover. Alright, so now we're on to our number 3. Three. Alright, so Hannah, begin with your number 3.
My number 3 is Land of the Free Part 2 by Gamma Ray. Yeah, I mean, power metal and it's not usually my cup of tea, but this record, I mean, was one of the first power metal records I ever listened to, and I still, to this day, I like to listen to it. Occasionally, not every day. It's not in my daily rotation, but I still listen to it quite often, and I think every song on this record is great. I mean, it's not. I mean, still, Gamma Ray is mostly known for Land of the Free, Part 1, and A New World Order or Somewhere Out in Space, mostly their earlier records, but this one is a very, very good record. And I mean, it speaks volume that I like to listen to it because it's a power metal record, since I usually don't. And that's why I think it deserves to be on this list, especially being rated this high, because I still think it's a great record even after. I mean, I know it for I've been knowing it for like 8 years or even longer. Can't really remember, but it's still great and fresh, and it has a very long song on it called Insurrection, and every note on this record, on this song, great.
Alright, my number 3, and Horsemen podcast alum Kamikaze Games will appreciate this, because this is one of his favorite bands. My number 3, Fear Factory, Soul of a New Machine. Their first album before they really exploded and became huge with Demanufacture and then Obsolete. But their first album, Soul of a New Machine, far more death metal and grindcore styled than their industrial groove thrash they eventually became. But yeah, Soul of a New Machine, fucking heavy as hell. Basically almost like an industrial version of Napalm Death during this time, but with some of the clean vocals. Often forgotten about, the first 2 albums that combine clean vocals and death metal vocals was this and Edge of Sanity's The Unorthodox, both in 92. This, in my opinion, was the better of the two, and you got a lot of fast stuff, and God bless Raymond Herrera for being able to play drums like that. Burton C. Bell, one of the most underrated vocalists, I think, in metal history. He can go low, he can go high, but he's a great, clean vocalist, too, and he's got a good voice. Dino Cazares, underrated guitarist. I mean, plus he got some very dark lyrics and some very thoughtful lyrics, like songs like Big God Rapes Souls, Crisis, which features a lot of audio samples from the movie Full Metal Jacket, which was pretty funny. But yeah, Soul of a New Machine, Fear Factory, amazing debut. Alright, Ricky, your number 3.
My number 3, it's an album that I know you're gonna agree with me, and that is Nostradamus by Judas Priest. Now,
I thought about putting that on my list.
You were gonna put it or what? This album is their first double album, their legendary career. It also marks the last album of K.K. Downing, which he was a part of.
Yeah.
This album basically is the story of Nostradamus. Through his prophecies, they also try to make him more human than the legend is by showing him, he's like a normal human being. He shows love, fear, anger, conquest, desires, everything. And this album portrays all of those traits. I mean, by far, the best track of that album is Conquest. I mean, it's such, almost to the point that goes all the way, almost symphonic metal. I could argue this album could be a symphonic metal album. I mean, besides that, you have
metal opera.
Yeah, war, death, new beginnings. The title track, I mean, this album gets higher and higher on my list. That is goes neck and neck with Defenders of the Faith and Screaming for Vengeance, which I argue Nostradamus for a long time was my favorite Priest album. It still is one of my favorites, but that's thrown God to Defenders of the Faith, and Nostradamus is close second. That's how much I love Nostradamus.
I mean, hell, if I had to choose my favorite song off that album, it'd be the song Death, because it was their best attempt at playing Doom. Mm-hmm. Or just doing their homage to Black Sabbath, which I thought was really cool. Mm-hmm. Alright, now to number 2. Oh, Lord. Oh, man. Ricky, you kicked this one off.
I'm not sure if you have this one, Levi. I doubt it, but I hope you don't. My number 2 is, in my mind, Slayer's most underrated album ever. Diablos in Música. Oh no, you have it, don't you?
I don't have it. I don't care for that album. Other than Stain of Mind. That's a good song. Everything else, no. Oh, man.
I mean, this is their most experimental album to date. Produced by the legend Rick Rubin. Their only album to go on drop C tuning. I mean, State of Mind is a great song. Bitter Peace also is a great song.
And he's dead.
The shit that this album gets, it's that it's associated with the new metal movement. I mean, even on their tour, they had bands like No Habit About Here. They had bands like Korn. They had bands like System of a Down. And I want to take this quote, Kerry King, that when in the New Metal Evolution episode, he stated, I was really bitter about what kind of music popular, and they weren't focused. The people forgetting Diablos in Music, which is arguably better than Saint Anger. Which I could agree that Diablos in Musica is a bit better than Saint Anger. And Levi is dead. Earth to Levi. Earth to Levi.
Edge of Sanity will return. Please don't die.
Wonderful.
Oh man.
Long distance reviving.
I knew this album was gonna get a bit controversial. That's why I picked it.
Not as controversial as my controversial outbursts in the previous episode.
I mean, I know it's controversial to Slayer fans because this album, like I said, even look at Levi. Just by even the name I said it, Diablos en Música, gets him like. And Levi wants to kill me.
Good that you live in Texas.
It's true.
I don't know if we could be friends.
Fine.
Oh, great. Oh my god. I feel like I've aged 30 years just hearing that. Oh man. My brain can't process this.
You're closer to retiring now.
I feel like Hannah whenever I mentioned Ghost's new album on my top 10 of the year. I feel just like Hannah right now. I understand how she feels because oh my god, Diabolis.
Oh, now you know. Now we know how to push each other's buttons.
Yeah, I could push your buttons with Ghost. Now he can push my buttons with that album. Oh my god, yeah. What can we push Artur with? Ghost, the same thing, I guess. I don't know.
Tool.
Oh yeah, Tool.
And I love Tool, but whatever.
You haven't found my buttons, so.
Yeah, I'm shocked I haven't found yours. But I will get my revenge on you, you bastard.
Because sometimes I feel like a Martin Pop out of the group. I basically love everything that's the most underrated stuff and weird stuff. If you notice, even on my list, if you've noticed on my list, I go everywhere. You go from death to thrash to black to prog to everything.
I think yours have the most variety.
Meanwhile, I have my own zone. I have thrash, death, and prog on mine, but.
And mine are just black.
My head.
Diablos en música, diablos en música, diablos en música.
Okay, now that I've recovered a little bit from my aneurysm I had right there, I apologize, people. Not the first nor the last time I'm going to have an aneurysm. Oh, boy. Okay, back on track now. My number 2... I've mentioned this album so many times in the past. Sarcophago. Again, when people talk Sarcophago, when people talk about Sarcophago, they always either talk about INRI or Rotting. Never this album. Laws of fucking Scourge. Again from 1991.
Magnifico. I love that album. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, this was... And I tried to advocate for this to be on the tech death chart because this was one of the first tech death albums ever created. This was Sarcophago doing a complete 180 from where they started as a proto-black, proto-death band on INRI before Rotting kind of being a little more death metal oriented, but then they went full on thrash tech death on Laws of Scourge. This would be like the precursor, in my opinion, to where bands like Revocation would come from. It's kind of like that a little bit. Plus, I love some of the progressive influences on this album, like the songs like Secret of a Window, which was the longest song. That was very much like a prog death metal song. That kind of was a precursor to like Opeth or even Edge of Sanity and blah, blah, blah. But you got a lot of brutal songs like the re-recording of Black Vomit. It's much faster, much more aggressive. But you also got Screeches from the Silence, which got play on Headbangers Ball in Europe back in the day.
I love that song.
Such an underrated album. Sarcophago fans who only focus on those first two releases definitely should give this a shot because... And also, probably in my opinion, the best produced album I've ever heard.
Yeah.
It's like, it's well produced, but it's still raw. And also the drums. Oh my god. I can only wish I could play as good as I believe it was... I can't remember who was the drummer for the album. I think he was DD Crazy was his name on this album. Fucking phenomenal drummer, especially on the song Piercings, the hyper blasts. Oh my god. So yeah, Sarkovko, The Laws of Scourge, number 2. Henna, your number 2.
My number 2 is Welcome to Sky Valley by Caius.
Caius, eh?
I mean, the reason why it's on there is, if you talk about stoner metal, most people talk about Sleep, and of course Sleep's magnum opus, Dope Smoker, or Electric Wizard with Funeralopolis, and or High on Fire, which just won the Grammy, or Fu Manchu, and I could go on and on. I mean, the thing with Caius is the debate if it's metal or not. And in my opinion, it's something borderline, but I still consider it to be a part of the whole stoner metal scene. And I think this record is perfect from start to finish. And I listen to it so often, and it doesn't get old. It's still so fresh, even though it's so old. And I think it's a magnificent record. I just love the atmosphere on there and the feeling you have on there. I mean, it's like driving through the American countryside, over highways, Route 66 and so on. And I simply love it. And I think a lot of people miss out on it because they think it's not metal, and which is stupid. Just great. And I think it's highly underrated, and that's why it's so high up on the list.
Alright, and now we're on to number 1. I'll get this one started. I mean, I talk about this band ad nauseum.
Probably Diabolicos.
Diablos en Música.
Yeah.
Yes, that's my number 1. Not really.
Surprise of the day.
But in all seriousness, I bring this band up at least once every episode of the Horsemen podcast. You hit the nail on the head, Broken Hope. Now, which album? That's hard because really their whole catalog minus Grotesque Blessings, which is kind of like their Saint Anger. But then again, that album was done during like a bad time for the band when a lot of their key members left and there was some turmoil. But I wanted to go with the first 2, Swamped in Gore, and then The Bowels of Repugnance. I mean, look at that gross cover. But this one looks like Donald Trump getting mutilated because of that hair. But it's weird, the original cover is just like a cheesy cover of like a zombie and a checkered board, which is weird. This is the re-release cover, but both of these albums part of, I would say, the ultimate brutal death metal duality. Again, when people talk brutal death metal, they always talk about Cannibal Corpse, Suffocation, Dying Fetus, Cryptopsy. This is the band that started that movement, Broken Hope. Started the same time as Cannibal and Suffocation, but did it a little more groovier. To me, these are like if Obituary was mixed with Terrorizer, especially on Swamped in Gore, because a lot of riffs remind me of Obituary, and a lot of the blasting reminds me of Terrorizer. Vocally, Joe Tychek's vocals, the most underrated death metal vocalist of all time, and arguably the most guttural of them all. Like that guy. They called him the esophagus for a reason. If you listen to this or this, he's a fucking death metal vocal genius who is right there on the back cover. Rest in peace. But yeah, Swamped in Gore, Bowels of Repugnance. If I were to choose one, I go with Swamped in Gore because this is where it all started. Plus, this album was probably the closest you would get to them sounding like they recorded at More Sound. And it was digital. First digital death metal album ever recorded. 1990, 1991. This, 92, 93. So, that's my number one. Ricky, your number one.
My number one. I already said
Another
it.
Slayer record.
Nah. I already told you. I'm very diverse when it comes to my list. I can go every direction possible in the rock and metal genres. My number one is, in my mind, one of the albums that started the progressive movement in the 70s in England. And that is Queen 2 by Queen. Now, this is the album that really they started into production. They created this kind of multi-tracking with this tremendous palettes of sounds and wave motion, kind of like things that prog nerds kind of do. This wasn't called prog at the moment. I mean, alongside King Crimson's In the Court of the Crimson King, Jethro Tull's Aqualung, and Just As Closer to the Edge, I think these were the 4 albums and bands, alongside some other American bands like maybe Kansas.
Yeah.
The progressive movement in England. And this album was the album that gave Queen their first top Billboard chart with 7 Seas of Rye. This album gets a bit overshadowed with, later releases like Night at the Opera, News of the World, A Kind of Magic. It's like I said, this album really shows the evolution of Queen of what we later become. I mean, if you take a song like Orc Battle, it's in the title. It's like a battle. You're in a battlefield. You're fighting for the promised land. It can create these epic songs that to this day still stand the test of time. And, it's a shame that, Freddie passed away very young. I mean, he was, I think, 40, 45, around there. He was in
Something
late,
like that, yeah.
late 40s. I mean, if he was still alive, he could have given a lot more. But this album, to me, is one of my favorite Queen albums next to Night of the Opera. Yeah. My number one, Queen 2.
All right, and now Hannah.
Before we come to my number one, I actually had a totally different record on this spot, but I cut it out because I don't consider it metal, and nobody would consider it metal. At first, I was thinking about putting Pink Floyd's Metal on number one. I mean, it's one of my favorite Pink Floyd records, mainly because Echoes is on there.
Yeah.
But I excluded it from the list because it isn't a metal record. But my number one, I talk about this band very, very often. And if you talk fucking no. The thing with this band is, if you talk about the best records of this band, you either mention The Mantle or Ashes Against the Grain. I would disagree with this. For me, this band has released a holy trinity of records, and this trinity also includes their debut record, Pale Folklore, which I think is, I mean, it's up with those two records. It can hold its own, and it's a great record, and I simply love every song on it, especially Hallways of Enchanted Ebony, which is one of my favorite Agalog songs ever. I love that they played some songs of this record when I saw them live. I think they work phenomenally well on stage, and it's one of my favorite records. Of course, it's not The Mental, and it's not Ashes Against the Grain, but it's equally as awesome. And besides that, there's also this EP called The White, which is basically a folky EP. And this EP also is great. There's nothing else to say about that one. And I think those two the white and pale folklore are highly underrated because everybody, when talking about Agalog, they only talk about the mantle or Ashes Against the Grain, and these records sadly dwell in the shadows of those two records, and it's Raphael is joining.
Oh boy. We're getting close to wrapping up here too.
I think we should wrap up after all the talk.
All right, so
Agalog, pale folklore.
I kind of had a feeling you was going to go with that whenever we talk about the mantle or Ashes Against the Grain. I figured you was going to go with pale folklore, but yeah, it's like we each have our own niche. Like Hannah's got Agalok, I got Broken Hope, I got no idea about Ricky. Artor, it's Moonspell.
Yep.
And for Kamikaze, it's Static X, but you get the idea. But anyways, that will do it for episode 8. And I forgot what we're going to do for episode 9. I believe when we talked about we were going to do a debate.
Fashion and metal and censorship.
Censorship and fashion and metal, which will be our first non-list episode, which, it should be interesting. It could be a bloodbath. Pun. Or maybe not. Maybe not. We'll see. But thank you guys so much for watching.
I mean, we will all just dress up Steel Panther-like for that episode.
I'll have to get some snakeskin boots and a leopard print vest. I don't know, but anyways, thank you guys so much for watching episode 8 of our top 10 underrated albums, plus a bazillion honorable mentions because of me. But yeah, episode 9, first non-list episode, debate about fashion and censorship and metal. Episode 10,
we're not sure yet.
Yeah, we haven't decided yet. We got a few ideas rolling around.
We have an idea.
Yeah, we've got a couple ideas thrown around. We just got to decide when we're going to do them. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Peace out. And horns up.